I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Project Connect Community Advisory Committee to order at 5:04 p.m. On Thursday, May 9, 2024, at the Austin Transit Partnership Office Boardroom at 203 Colorado Street. I'll start with our roll calls. This is Chair Azhar. I'm here. I'll move next to Vice Chair Flateau. Here. She's here. Secretary Summers.
I'm here.
Mr. Brooks. Mr. Hendricks.
Present.
Mr. Crossley.
Here.
Ms. Mayer.
Here.
Mr. Reed.
Here.
Ms. Fan. Mr. Gorse.
Here.
And that gets us to Mr. Conley. I do want to say, did I miss anybody before I go on? I believe that covered everybody. I did want to say, sadly, I've received an official resignation from Member Conley. He is moving for work purposes to another state and will not be serving on the CSE moving forward. He, of course, really talked about how much he cares about this and would likely be joining us at some point in public comment just to thank us and talk to us about the work that he's done. I really do want to thank him for the service that he has provided us for over 2 years in this role and was a key part of setting up and getting a lot of the conversation started here. So a big thank you to him. Our first item is the land acknowledgement. I just want to check in, Mr. Lopez, could you read out the land acknowledgement on behalf of the CSE members?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. To ground yourself before starting this meeting, it's important to talk about the history of this region. Long before it came to be known as Waterloo or Austin, this region has drawn people here for thousands of years, in part because of our waterways and the wealth of natural resources. This region has been home to the Tonkawa, the Coalteca, as well as the Comanche, Lipan Apache, Sana, Humanos, and many others I may not have named who were also caretakers of this land. I highlight this history because Native and Indigenous peoples are routinely erased from the conversation, referred to as having disappeared or having been conquered. Native and Indigenous peoples are still here and present in what we now call Austin. The pursuit of white land ownership, profit, and so-called progress has harmed Black, Indigenous, and people of color in this city. The effects of the legacy of settler colonialism, the theft of land, slavery, and genocide are still felt and present with us today. It's vital to keep this history in mind as you do this important work and make a commitment to stop perpetuating the cycle of violence against Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez, for reading that out on behalf of the CSE. Our first item today is, actually, before we go today, do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
The first person signed up is Chris Kirby. I don't know if he's on or not, or she's on or not.
Perfect, we can see if.
I don't know who his phone number is.
They can't hear you on us.
And then Barbara Epstein has also called in to talk, so.
Okay, Ms. Epstein, do you want to speak to us first? And we'll just move you over so that you have the ability to talk.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, ma'am.
Great. Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I have been a resident of Austin for 50 years, and I have depended on public transit for those 50 years. I am now a semi-retired attorney doing work with seniors, and so I have a very detailed perspective on what seniors need these days and aren't really getting with our transit system. What concerns me is that we seem to be talking as if we're planning for transit, but we're not really doing something that will get people out of their cars. This morning, I heard a news report that the airport is planning a parking garage for 7,000 cars. I live near I-35 where we're talking about 20 lanes. Now that is the state, not us, but it still has an effect on people's attitude towards using cars. And I've given you all a couple of questions, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating the info, but for me, there is nothing in your plans that will improve my transit situation at all, even though the last time I could look at a bill, I was billed $880 in 1 year for the bond package that was passed. I am concerned about having good transit because I myself am dependent on public transit. I've been legally blind all my life, and I try to use the buses when I can. But in my neighborhood north of UT, right now, if I want to go to my local HEB or to the doctor, it takes me, if the weather's okay and I don't have aggressive drivers uh, uh, that hit me in a crosswalk, it takes me half an hour to walk. It takes about 45 minutes to take the 2 bus routes. But if somebody gives me a ride, it's 5 minutes. So I don't see any people who are driving now being willing to get out of their cars to use public transit, even though I'm an advocate for it. What I would like to see Cap Metro and ATP do is advocate for more targeted destinations, bringing back circulators like the old Dillo, and doing things to encourage people to use public transit. As I've told some reps, the pickup van service, what it tells seniors is they can have a taxi, not that they should ever have to bother stepping onto a bus or a train. And I don't think that people understand when they're planning that that's the effect. And the other thing that I keep noticing is that most of the workforce in our city, that is city and state workers, and I used to be a state worker, teachers, policemen, firemen, they're all commuting in their cars. So we aren't really solving our transit problems. I want to see it work, but I think that there needs to be more targeted destination planning. And I think the ultimate question is, can you show that public transit will be faster than driving a car? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Epstein. I really appreciate that. We also have another speaker. Mr. Banks.
Chris on. Doesn't look like it unless they want to raise their hand if they are on, but I don't see Chris on it.
Chris, if you are on, could you raise your hand? Or if you're joining us via phone,
Look at the phone number that was on the email. so
Okay.
I-
if they're able to join us, please let us know and we can definitely hear them. I also want to acknowledge Committee Member Fan has joined us as well. And I do want to say we're being asked if folks who are joining us virtually can turn on their camera, that would be great. I'll pause to see that folks are able to do that before we continue.
From committee.
For the committee members. Thank you, Mr. Banks. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. Moving on to our first item for the day is approval of our April 11th meeting minutes. Those were shared previously. Hopefully folks were able to look over them. Is there anything in there that folks would like changed? If not, do I have a motion to approve our April 11th minutes?
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes from, I'm sorry, April
11th.
11th, 2024.
Thank you, Ms. Lato.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Plateau, seconded by Ms. Summers to approve the April 11th meeting minutes for the CSC. All those in favor, raise your hands or say aye.
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 That passes unanimously. Thank you all so much. This moves us to our discussion items for the day. And the first one is a presentation on the mobility and infrastructure workforce plan. And we have some guest speakers here who are joining us. And hopefully they'll be able to introduce yourselves and get started. We're very thankful for you to be here. I know this is something that our community has been working on for a while, so it's exciting to hear that update here today. You can get started at any point. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Awesome. I'm on this side of the world. It's been a little while since I've been able to speak to you all as an actual presenter. So see why we have a little bit of we always have slight technical difficulties here, but we're going to get through it. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Chavez. I'm Senior Vice President of Equity and Community Partnership here at Austin Transit Partnership. I am here representing us in the workforce development world of ATP. So as a starting point, before I pass it over to my partners, as a starting point, before I pass it over to my partners here, I'm going to reset our stage because it's been a while since we've talked about this topic. You may recall back in December of 2021, when we signed the Joint Powers Agreement. And in that agreement, there was a statement about workforce development and a requirement that any contractor on Project Connect, one, consider workers' defense topics, but also workforce development, which included construction careers programs, local hire, apprenticeship connections, and also trade skills programs. And so from that language in the JPA, we looked broadly about how we really build out this program in a comprehensive way in Austin and across the region, partnered with Workforce Solutions and CAC Metro to do this as a starting point to plant the seed and grow. So that's where we start, and I turn it over to my partners here and ask them to introduce themselves.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Tamara Atkinson, and I serve as the CEO of Workforce Solutions Capital Area.
And my name is Amber Warren. I am the Senior Director of Business Engagement with Workforce Solutions Capital Area. We want to
start the next slide.
Yes, and please, whenever you need to move to the next slide, let us know. And also a reminder to everyone to speak slowly so our interpreters can follow along. Thank you.
That's it. So really talking about what we want to do here, you know, the opportunity for workforce development in this area is massive. What we knew pre-COVID was that we were already struggling to fill spaces when it comes to construction workforce and really every level of jobs in the mobility and infrastructure space. And so this really raised, one, a challenge for us and an opportunity to look at workforce development in an entirely new way with a new paradigm shift that we can move towards. Next slide.
So to give a perspective on what that means, we did a research study last year to dive into this workforce. I want to thank CAC Metro and Austin Transit Partnership to help us create this partnership and really stand up our mobility and infrastructure work. Sorry for the feedback on the microphone. I think it's muted.
Great.
Okay. So this data that we found in our research study indicated that in 2022, nearly 19% of the labor force in Austin was made up by this mobility and infrastructure workforce. You can see that breakdown here with operations and supervision, the skilled trades, general construction, fleet repair and maintenance, and frontline mobility. This workforce is making up almost 223,000 people, which is more than what our healthcare and manufacturing workforce combined is. So it really gives a perspective of how big this workforce impact is in the local economy. Next slide, please.
All right, so I'm going to cover the key findings from this research. Let me just also build on what Amber was just saying. I think that we were not expecting to find that this industry sector was as large as it was. And so what it told us is, for too long, we have undervalued, I believe, the workers and the potential for career development in this industry sector. And with the opportunity that has arisen from federal funds that can come in and provide support for these massive infrastructure projects, we have an opportunity and a moment in time to not just build roads, but build community. And I think that's probably one of the most exciting findings. But let's dig into the numbers. For all of you who are data geeks like I am, let's talk about what we learned by the numbers. Number one, top headline, what we see is that this industry sector, mobility and infrastructure, is going to create 10,000 jobs a year for the next 20 years. So, and then relatedly, number two, when we look at how many people we're currently training in our region to fill these jobs, we see that we're going to be left in a best case scenario with 4,000 annual with a training gap of 4,000 individuals, workers, that will only exacerbate the skill shortages. So where it already feels like it's tight, we can see it in the numbers that it is indeed tight, and it's only going to get tighter. But then number three, let's see this as both an opportunity and a challenge. Women make up just 14% of the mobility and infrastructure workforce. Why is that a challenge? That's a challenge because we are not fully tapping into the potential of women in our community, but that also is a challenge and an opportunity because to help close that gap of 4,000 workers a year needed in this industry, if we can address issues that women face in getting into and staying in the industry, we can go a long way in closing that gap. Next slide. All right, number four on the list from our research, we learned that employers are largely disconnected from skilled trade talent pool. So interestingly, when we surveyed employers, they said that finding skilled trades workers was one of their top demands, but it was also one of the hardest areas for them to recruit for. At the same time, by the numbers, we found that our local talent pipelines, including our trade unions, including our traditional educational providers, were actually producing, meaning graduating, the highest number of workers in skilled trades. So we see there's a mismatch somewhere. Something's not connecting right in that equation. So that's part of what we're going to need to solve for. Number five, there's no consistent standard training period for mobility and infrastructure training. Now, our friends in labor will tell us for a long time, forever, apprenticeship has been the core model for how training has been done in construction and skilled trade, and they're exactly right. And those apprenticeship programs typically have 2-year plus training programs. And also in the community-based organization and other post-secondary education space, we see trainings that can be as short as 6 weeks to a few months. And then again, as we get into apprenticeship programs, we see 2 years. Why is this an issue, you might ask? Well, the issue is if you are a person trying to decide how you can enter into this industry sector and you're looking at training options, it can be very confusing to understand, well, what do I get for a 6-week training versus a 2-year without them having to go provider by provider to ask the question. So we know we need to make it easier to understand what the different outcomes are and how much employers value the outcomes and certifications from different trainings at different training periods. And then number 6, our present day recruiting methods are limited. In the full slide deck that we've put together, and it is available on our website, wfscapitalarea.com. We have the full slide deck. We surveyed where training providers are currently finding the students for their programs. And it was a word cloud of all different ways, from word of mouth to their faith organizations, to their friends, to the internet, all over the place. And so we see that if we're going to fill a 4,000 worker a year training gap, we're going to need to get a lot more organized and sophisticated in how we are presenting awareness about the opportunities in this area, helping students and workers navigate and explore, and then also being able to measure that outreach is being effective.
So hopefully you don't get any feedback from me going into the strategies and the policy considerations that this research led us into. So the first one being incentivize. So we're looking at higher local policies to put into place to incentivize employers and other stakeholders to hire from our workforce and tapping into non-traditional talent. So looking at women making up 14%, how do we incentivize individuals and employers to utilize hiring and training from those populations and non-traditional talent? This helps us think differently to really innovate on our recruiting methods, which leads into number 2 of recruiting. How do we increase that non-traditional talent? When we're looking at the infrastructure academy, how do we put in very intentional processes to make sure that we're recruiting diverse talent that reflects the Austin workforce and the people who live here? How do we make sure that individuals that live here can work here? And the infrastructure academy is really building in those intentional thoughts and strategies to do so. Leading into number 3 for pipeline, how do we market these careers? How do we make people want to move into the mobility and infrastructure sector, see themselves in this workforce? Looking at the legacy that these jobs create for individuals has really led us to think about our tagline of "Make a Living Making Austin." Really being able to say, I built that and I helped create that, so that people aren't just going for a job, they're really going for building up their community in that development space. So we're looking at that for pipeline. When we go into the next slide for number 4, you'll see that we're looking to harmonize. Yeah, harmonize. So how do we harmonize the certifications that different projects are asking for? When we looked at our research, we were seeing different projects were requiring different certifications or education within the workforce. So how do we line that up so that it's easier for our job creators and individuals to get these types of jobs? In addition, we're looking at coordination with number 5. So coordination not only for the Austin region, but the surrounding area, as well as going all the way down into San Antonio. We recognize that a lot of these projects have larger scope and impact, and that the workforce is stretching across the greater region as well. So how do we coordinate that? One of the things that we're doing is looking at CIEF's Trades Day to create a youth event to be able to attract our future workforce into these types of careers across San Antonio and Austin. And then lastly, funding. How do we map out funding opportunities to make sure that workforce development isn't an afterthought, that we're thinking long-term? How do we make sure that we're investing in what is needed to make these projects a reality? That includes funding for childcare, transportation to make sure that people can get to and from their jobs, so that they can successfully be in this workforce and not have to worry about those types of things. The next slide will go into information about our Austin Infrastructure Academy.
Okay, I'll take this one. So maybe you've heard about the Austin Infrastructure Academy. Again, thanks to CAT Metro and ATP for being by our side through all of this. in this process, we recognize that in addition to those 6 strategy areas that Amber just laid out, we really needed to have a tangible example for the community to get involved in for where this training could take place and what it could look like. So the opportunity, again, to restate what Courtney had said at the top is that we see that these investments that are coming to our community have an opportunity to be transformative in regional construction infrastructure. And if we plan this out right, we can tackle affordability challenges, all while creating family supporting jobs and career pathways, all while enhancing regional mobility. So the Infrastructure Academy is a one-of-a-kind public-private academy that integrates recruitment, because we think we've shared with you a little bit about some of the challenges. We've got a lot of numbers, a lot of people that we need to train, so we need to integrate recruitment. It needs to serve as a comprehensive training hub. We need to address some of the barriers that keep women and other workers from being able to come into and stay in. And from our research, we see that childcare and childcare support is one of the leading supports that the workers and the job creators call for, all in an effort to connect local people to career pathways in construction and operations. Next slide. So here are the 7 tenets of what the Academy will seek to achieve. So hopefully, as you look at these, you will see how we are linking back to some of the challenges that we saw in the research. Training and alignment. We really want to align training programs with in-demand skills and job sequencing based on real-time needs. So you'll notice that we're not saying every training has to be cookie cutter. That would not serve our community well, and it would not be respectful of what's already been going on and working in our community. But we do think that we need to make sure that all of our training programs are right-sized to not only the scope, but also with the skills that are needed, because skill demands are changing quickly, and we want to help our education community be able to have what they need to keep up. Wraparound services, I talked a little bit about that. It does include childcare, but it will also include transit for the transit workers. We know that transportation has got to be a part of it because we want to look to eliminate barriers. Placement and navigation, we want to facilitate that matchmaking between the job seekers and the job creators. I gave the example earlier about skilled trades and how hard it was for many of our job creators to find those individuals trained. That's just an example. It should not be that hard. The more friction we add to the process, the more discouraged workers and job creators are going to get. Robust pipeline. Just look at the numbers. We know we're going to need quite a few workers, and that's even before in the next 20 years, we announce new projects that come online. So we really want to look at how do we diversify, how do we add equity to our talent pipeline with a specific focus on individuals who are underserved in Austin. The truth is, we can afford to have no worker left behind. Everyone in this community that wants to work, there is a place for them in our economy. And we really stand for making sure that everyone can find their way into the right industry and occupation that fits their needs. Governance, we are looking to set up a governance structure that reflects stakeholder input and ensures accountability to funders. So what does that look like? It may or may not look like standing up a new nonprofit, but what it will for sure look like is multiple opportunities throughout this design phase for community and public input. That's going to look like open houses, that's going to look like surveys, it's going to look like constant feedback from the stakeholders and the workers themselves to make sure that we're getting it right.
Can we slow down a little as well for interpreters?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
I will, sorry. Next, impact and evaluation. We'll create an evaluation framework to assess the impact and outcomes. All these things that we're talking about that we want to do are only as good as we can ultimately measure and show the community what we're doing as a result. So without numbers, without outcomes, it's just words. So we know that we want to be intentional and from the very beginning, set this up so that we can, as a community, measure the outcomes. And let's be honest, there will probably be information in the outcomes that tell us we need to do some things differently. Do we know what those things are right now? No, we're on a journey, but with data and with input, we can course correct as we need to, as we look to serve our community. And last but not least, a sense of belonging. I loved the tagline that Sarah gave us just a little while ago, because if we are successful, when we're successful, we're establishing a brand that fosters inclusiveness, that fosters a sense of belonging and invitation to participate and stay in this community. Because let's not forget, we are simultaneously trying to address affordability while we address mobility challenges. And with that, I will say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Atkinson. I'll open it up to questions right now, and we can start with anybody, whether online or in person. If folks have any questions or comments. Mr. Hendricks, please go ahead.
Jeremy Hendricks, thank you for presenting tonight. I, of course, have seen different versions of this presentation in multiple settings. I actually sat on the leadership team for the Mobility and Infrastructure Partnership. There are a lot of questions still about the Infrastructure Academy. I think maybe that's a newer slide than I've seen previously. And I know that we're all waiting with bated breath about the governance question and the kind of the steering committee and all that. What's the timeline there for that?
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for your service on the leadership group, Jeremy. We really appreciate it. So we have entered into the design phase of the work, and it will continue through the fall of this year. And so we are currently looking at what is, we want the form to follow the functions. So we are looking at how we tackle each section of what's needed to bring the Infrastructure Academy online, and then who are the right individuals, representatives in the community, with our job creators, with the public sector, with labor and so on, to be able to help us achieve those goals. So I would expect, Jeremy and committee, that you will begin to receive information and a request for input as we move into the summer and early fall. So I want to be clear that we will not be announcing a new structure. It will be a call for input, and there will be an opportunity for us to both describe what we think we're looking for in any next governance phase, as well as ask for input.
Thank you for that. I have just two more quick little things. One, I know on that slide, I know it's not up right now, on the accountability, it says accountability to funders. I think it's important to add accountability to the community as well. They're not just input on the front end, but also accountability as we move ahead. So that's, and I'm sure that that's already in the back of your mind, but actually saying that there, I think is important. Another thing that I think is missing from that slide, it talks a lot about, and I've said this in other settings, it talks about job seekers, job creators and all that, which is all great, but ultimately the goal is to build careers. And so I think the word career is nowhere on that. And so that's where eventually that connection and making sure that they're not just going to a job, but going to a program that's going to be additional learning, even if this initial phase is 2 weeks to 6 weeks or whatever it is, but eventually the goal is to build a career. And because we have so many projects, really someone could spend their entire career just building things in Austin that we're talking about today. And so anyway, that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would call your attention, if maybe we go back to the third to the last slide, please. There we go. I'm sorry, right there. Thank you. We do talk about jobs. You're absolutely right, supporting jobs. But what we're really looking toward is building the sustainable career pathways. So you're exactly right that we want it to be about careers. And it is true that we've toggled in this document some between the terminology of jobs and careers, but our eye on the prize is careers, because that's how you get to family sustaining wages, and that's how you address affordability. So couldn't agree with you more.
The only thing that I'll add on that, especially from the community aspect, is as we move into this next phase of design, and this is our first step with the CAC directly, but really involving community dialogue, because we cannot build for community, we need to build with community along the way, because these jobs and careers are for them. So we take that to heart.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hendricks, and thank you for all of your work and engaged work in this sector in our economy. Other folks with questions, whether in the room or virtually? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Crossley.
I was just curious about the sort of the boundaries here of sort of which projects and which jobs and people. And so like, will this be open to, say, residents of the whole metropolitan region? And then just thinking about if there's a private contractor is building sidewalks in Round Rock, will this help people get jobs there too? Or, so what are the boundaries in terms of, and are there things we could do to make sure that there's sort of more opportunities and more people going through this?
And so I'll start that answer and then turn it over to Tamara and her team too, which is, our goal is to create a skilled and qualified workforce that can really go where they want to go. We don't want to control that space. We can open up jobs to a lot of areas. What we do want to do is focus on, like I'm at ATP, so I am going to focus on how to get more folks into our jobs, specifically what can we do from an incentivized perspective to ensure that people want to be on our jobs and things like that. And so that's what I offer up and then turn it over to Tamara.
Yeah, I would say that we are mindful that our workforce is regional and live regionally. That being said, we dance with the ones that brung us. And we started this with partnership with Cap Metro and Austin Transit Partnership, and Workforce Solutions Capital Area serves the Austin Travis County service area. But we act locally, but we think and plan regionally. So as Amber noted before, we know that our labor shed is to San Antonio and then up north, Round Rock and beyond. And so it is about recognizing where the workers are, where they're going to come from, while we also recognize where we have, for now, authority and influence. I would think that over time, as we're able to show success, that we will hopefully be able to encourage and bring into our coalition other jurisdictions from outside of Austin, because just as Courtney said, they stand to benefit from the skilled workers.
And if I can add one last thing, our industry sector partnership model is designed to take the industry's consideration as a whole of what the needs are. So the skills that we're looking to train and develop should cross-populate many employers' needs and benefits. So really a rising tide lifts all ships type of approach with that collaborative work.
Appreciate that. Do we have other questions? Let me just say a few things, and then I definitely have a few questions as well. I think the biggest one is just how exciting this work is and to see it all come together. So thank you to all the partners and for ADP and Cap Metro for working on this as well. And it's a really good reminder to folks that, while Project Connect, of course, is a transit and infrastructure project at the end of the day that we're serving our community, it also is a really large job creator. And to Mr. Hendricks, to your point, putting people on a pathway to sustainable careers over a lifetime. And I think that's a very exciting aspect of this project for what it serves our community in ways way beyond transit access. So I think that's very exciting. It's a good reminder. I guess, Ms. Chavez, this is a question for you. I know it's not exactly the same, but how will this intersect with our minority business and women-owned business enterprise work as well?
That's a great question, and one that we are kind of dipping our toes into right now, because part of the challenge we see when it comes to small minority-owned businesses is capacity building. So how can someone actually get more folks on their job force when they can't necessarily take on risk or cost and overhead? And so even looking at models that will help support that as we grow is in our future development plans, and so stay tuned.
I really appreciate that because I think that's important. And one thing I was noticing in the slides was, as you were presenting, just how underrepresented women are in these sectors. And I know we're sort of at the starting point of implementing some of these programs, but do you all have a sense of what kind of work can be done to make sure that more women are included in this work as we proceed?
That is a great question. I'd like to say that's the $1 million question, because as we identified in the data, if we can figure that out, we'll go a long way in closing our skill gap and really ensuring better equity in the workforce. So we know what we've seen so far in the data, and we know what we've heard anecdotally and through our focus groups. And in the data, we hear about supports that are needed. We also hear about, through our data, about how welcoming or not some of the work sites are for women. And we also hear about women saying that they really hadn't considered it. They didn't know that women were invited. So I think we are just beginning our discovery, but we know that this is an area that we need to focus on in order to be successful.
So the only thing I'll add is that what I appreciate, because that concept is complex and challenging, right, for any of these industries, the coordination between what Workforce Solutions does, what a government agency does that oversees the contracts, and then what the employers do is such a good comprehensive way to encourage employers to take real responsibility to support that belonging concept and bringing people to their spaces. And I've appreciated the dialogue that Jeremy's had, that the folks at local associate general contractors have had, recognizing those challenges too and willing to work with us on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Hendricks. I would love to hear from you.
I just wanted to add to that. Absolutely. That's the really interesting thing about this in sector partnership, is that it's brought all these different people together from the community, and it recognized problems that we've seen with justice involved individuals having obstacles to the industry, with women having obstacles to the industry. And so it started all those conversations that we've all kind of been having, but not in coordination. And so thank you again for the work that you're doing there and bringing folks together.
And thank you, Mr. Hendricks. And I think that's a really good point as well, to look at how, as much as allowable, because it will be a federally funded project, but within Project Connect, how much we can work with particularly justice involved individuals and see that we're as inclusive as possible within whatever the federal guidelines are. So we're expanding those opportunities for folks. And one tiny thing that I'll add to that is that I think one of the exciting things about it is, because we're looking at sort of mobility infrastructure much more holistically as a sector, there's a lot of jobs out of construction that will come from this as well. I know Cap Metro has been working a lot on recruitment for bus drivers and for looking at technicians and experts. And also, I mean, honestly, we have public safety ambassadors. There's just so many more facets to the mobility job sector that I really hope that we can really push the boundaries with gender and some of those other things as a part of that as well.
If I may add, I'll say that it's on my mind a lot too. We think about construction because construction is the first phase. But the more we get into this, we also know that there will be maintenance jobs, there will be operations jobs, there will be jobs that we do want to diversify each part of it. But as we go forward, not all of the types of work will remain constant. It will evolve as these projects come online and evolve. So we see it'll be interesting for us to also assess where there is interest in among women and other individuals who have not been historically represented in the industry as we move forward, and collect data on that and try to tell the story better than we can right now.
That's really exciting. I have one other question, but I'll wait to see if other folks have questions as well or comments. If not, I'll go ahead and ask so when you were looking at the data, does this include, I'm going to assume it definitely includes the I-35 expansion because that's going to be big. Does it also include the airport expansion as a part of that as well? So what all is included in this mobility concept?
Great. It's like you read my slides, the full deck. So we looked at 3 major public sector projects, and then we also took into account 2 private sector projects. And I'll explain why. So the 3 public sector were Project Connect, light rail, the airport expansion, and I-35. So you get an A on that exam, very good. The two private sector were Tesla and Samsung. And why did we include them in this study? Because we know that large projects such as Tesla and Samsung are going to pull from the same workforce that these public sector projects are. So we cannot put our head in the sand and act like the public sector is an island unto itself. It's the contractors, the job creators are competing in a market against the private sector and vice versa. So we need to be aware of that. What we intend to do through this Infrastructure Academy is really look at no worker left behind. We want to support and connect local people to local careers, and that's going to mean both in the public and private sector.
I appreciate that very much. And thank you all for being here. And thank you for this presentation, the great work that y'all are doing, including our staff. Thank you all. This moves us to our second item, which was a public safety update from our folks at CAP Metro. Big thank you to them for keeping us abreast of this, as a lot of rapid work has been happening. So I just want to thank them all for being here. And I'll pass it along to y'all. Thank y'all, and y'all can get started whenever you want.
Good evening. Peter, get started.
Hi there, I'm Peter Breton. I'm a Community Engagement Coordinator at CAP Metro.
And I'm Eric Robbins, Chief Administrator, Transit Police with CAP Metro.
I'm Cheyenne Conyer. I'm the Chief of Staff at CAP Metro.
We're excited today to give you a public safety update. We've been doing a lot of work in the meantime since we last gave you an update. I'm going to hand over to Chief Robbins for the first slide here.
Yes, just giving you all a quick update on our overview of our program. We have what we call a three-pronged approach to public safety, and that's our public safety ambassadors. And I'm sure most of you all have heard about this, but our community intervention specialists, as well as our transit police officers. And basically our public safety ambassadors, they are out in the field, they're trained professionals that's out there to hopefully be our eyes and ears, as well as try and attempt to de-escalate and address any issues that's basically not a life-threatening or an emergency situation. Our intervention specialists, they're basically social workers who are trained to go out and address issues that's ongoing, recurring issues, dealing with anything from substance abuse to mental health issues and stuff like that. And they can get resources and try to address these ongoing issues that we see within our system. And of course, lastly, is transit police, which is where I'm at to initiate and build a police department for CAP Metro. And of course, what we look at within this three-pronged approach is not everything is considered a police issue. So we will only be there to address those issues that we really believe are important to affect the safety of our transit community. In our public safety program update, again, I talked about our community intervention specialists, and we have 2 specialists, 1 supervisor. You can see a lot of these are the yearly metrics for what they've done over the year, of over 1,200 engagements and so forth. I don't want to read every number, but just you can kind of get an idea of some of the things that have taken place, including with our public safety ambassadors. We have 1 manager, 3 supervisors, 22 ambassadors. They work day, middle of the day, as well as late evenings. So, and they just recently had 5 new hires. They're basically making contacts, over almost 3,000 customer contacts. And that's important because when they're talking to our customers, they understand what's happening, what's taking place, and even our employees. I was out today just speaking with some of our employees at the North Labor Transit Center, North Lamar Transit Center, and just understanding what's happening on the system. And so those are the types of things that our ambassadors are doing as well. So, but as you can see, through February through March, these are the contacts. And of course, they've had some multiple success stories, even on our intervention side, as far as finding family and rapid shelter access and those types of things. So, and I'll pause if there's any
Yeah, I
comment.
was just going to briefly add that this element is important. And it was intentional to launch these two elements before we and while we continue to set up the Transit Police Department. Transit Police is critical and necessary, but these folks are out there every day getting a real picture of what our public safety needs are, and we're very proud of their work. I do want to highlight that our Community Intervention Specialist program just very recently won an industry award and is being looked at by other transit industry, our peers in the transit industry, as a model for success that other agencies can look to, because again, they're not just, and you've heard this before from our CEO and others, but they're not just going and having a brief customer interaction and escalating things or moving people along. They are really trying to get down to the root of why somebody might be experiencing what they're experiencing and connect them with the services that are appropriate. And so we're very proud of this. This is hard, time-consuming work that both the intervention specialists do especially, but the public safety ambassadors as well. We have a large transit system that is more than just Austin, and these folks kind of have to be everywhere, and we operate 24/7, essentially, minus the major holidays, right? So we're just very proud of this work. I really wanted to just pause and let the numbers sink in there before we move to the next slide. So we know that the CAC has a particular interest in how the creation of the Transit Police Department is going. One of the things that is hot and heavy right now in terms of our time and our commitments to the community is the development of transit police policies. You all are familiar, every transit police agency, just like normal municipal police or anything else, is going to have policies that are administrative policies that guide the work of the transit police. And they include everything from mission, vision, values of the department, to reporting structure, to true operational and day-to-day tactical type things, which we'll get into in a minute. And what we have done is we've established a feedback process because we heard from the community that it was critical that as we're creating these policies, we provide ample opportunity for feedback. I also want to express my appreciation to one of your own members for significant participation in this process, and
ask our speakers to slow down a little bit.
yes, always. Every time I come, I'm a fast talker. I'm sorry. Thank you. And I want to just thank committee member Fateau for joining us in this process. Sorry, committee over the last couple of months. Essentially, the process starts on the left-hand side of the screen with our internal process. Eric's team, Chief's team, my team, myself, and one of my staff members, as well as our CAP Metro legal staff, receives a standard policy from our consultant that we've hired, Lexipol. It's a service. It's a standard policy that's not unique to CAP Metro. And what we do is we redline it heavily, I would say. We have multiple meetings a week where we go through these policies line by line and redline them to ensure that they are in alignment with CAP Metro's vision and what we have said we want the transit police to be, as well as our general operational needs. Legal is obviously there to ensure alignment with state law, but we also are making sure that these policies that are specific to one area of our business are not out of alignment with the rest of our agency. The next piece, once we've kind of done that red line, is that it's reviewed by our deputy CEO and our chief safety officer, Gardner Tabon, who I believe is on the call as well today. They review it, that preliminary draft, if you will, and they sign off on it for public engagement phase. We then keep moving to the right on the screen. We then launch into this public process. Each policy is posted in full as a draft for 3 weeks of public comment. We, I think, specifically advertise it to you all, to the Public Safety Advisory Committee members, as well as other folks. We've been pushing it out on social media, driving people to the website. So it really is Whether you care in particular about one policy or all policies, we're trying to give that space for public comment. Then the Public Safety Advisory Committee Subcommittee on Policies meets to discuss and ask questions on the policy and process. And we've invited you all to participate in that as well. Those meetings have been over the last few weeks, or last few months, I'm sorry, have been happening regularly, almost every other week. We've been moving some forward. Once we receive those public comments through the online portal, as well as any questions and comments that we get from the Public Safety Advisory Committee Subcommittee, we then review all of the feedback. We've been getting a lot of questions, so we seek to answer those questions. We might merge language, or there might be instances where we don't agree with the language and we document, what we've accepted, what we've changed it, and why. We provide an updated draft then back to the public with a log of the changes. So in my experience, it's really important to not only hear the public, but say how you used or what you used in that feedback. And so we're trying to be intentional, and those are all online even now. Finally, once we get through that process, we have a final policy that is signed off on by our chief, Eric. We also post that final alongside the comment log on the website, and those are again available right now. I want to pause there and just acknowledge, I know one of the questions that we get from the community a lot is, who is the signature of these policies? These are transit police administrative policies, and so therefore they are signed off on by our CEO or her designee. In this case, it is Eric. These aren't going to our board for authorization, which is standard procedure. Taking away police and looking at another area of our business, we don't have our board also adopt other operational policies, and that's what these are. But we are trying to be intentional in posting them publicly. We've met with our board members. We've encouraged them that if they have any comments or questions or strong desire to see any policy at a board meeting, that we would be willing to do that. The finals posted on the webpage, and then that in practice column of the slide, this is kind of an evergreen process, if you will. The policies are never truly final. They are always going to be reviewed annually, which is a best practice once we begin operations. And then any substantive changes will go through the same process that I've outlined here the last few minutes. So if in a year from now, something in the transit police or police industry dictates that a change is necessary in the policy, we would take it back through the same process. That's been really important because police policies obviously do change as current events happen, as laws change, et cetera. So we're always kind of willing to look back at the policies and make sure that they are appropriate.
I know that this is our next slide, but I actually want to end up on this one for hopefully a better discussion. So I'm going to skip to the last slide in the presentation here, and then we'll come back to this one. All right. So just about 2 weeks ago, we completed our third round of policy review, mostly heard from the community in our subcommittee meetings rather than asynchronously through Conveo or our online platforms. We expect our next subcommittee meeting to happen on the 23rd, or well, that's what's on the slide. It's very likely that that date will be pushed back, and the specific policies that we're going to be bringing to that next subcommittee meeting are still being determined, but hopefully those details will be confirmed about next week, and we'll be communicating with the community, your work group, your group in full if you would like. Taking a step back from policies for a moment, I wanted to point out the major themes in the feedback that we've been hearing over the past year or so. We've had many questions and comments and feedback on these 5 different topics: capital and operating budget, long-range timeline, staffing and training, oversight, routing and response to emergency or public safety calls. And that one I've heard it also noted as triage, but we want to make sure that we're being specific here so that someone who is not familiar with that term or is familiar with it in a different context knows what we're talking about. These themes, these topics are going to be things that we're covering at future subcommittee meetings, whether that's our currently ongoing program strategies and policies subcommittee meetings or our other subcommittee meetings like community engagement and rider experience or the operations and personnel subcommittee meetings. Before I jump to the other slide, I want to let Eric or Cheyenne, if they would like to say something.
Thank you. I do want to add, we have been very focused on policies lately, but as the year evolves, we are going to get more busy with more of these areas. So it just depends, on the project plan of kind of where we're at. We very recently, finalized thinking about, not finalized, but the CAP Metro budget process is underway right now. And so we now have kind of a game plan starting with fiscal year 25. And we do anticipate that the next couple of things that are going to be out in the community, if I were guessing, are the budget and the budget timeline and then staffing as well. We're finalizing some details on things like job descriptions, but we're going to be posting those for public comment and answering any questions before we actually post them as jobs. So we have some work ahead of us, but of course the big ones that a lot of folks care about and that we care about as well are staff, our training and oversight, which are going to be coming to the community this year as well. So I know that there's a lot of questions right now about certain things, and there are certain questions we just don't know the answer to quite yet. But we are committed again to bringing these topics back to the community over the course of the year, and obviously before we have any transit police officers out on our system.
Before I took over my part of the presentation, Cheyenne overviewed the policy process, both our internal and public process. I wanted to note we're really happy about our public process so far. It's been working. We've heard feedback from many, many different community members from across the city on a lot of different topics. And we've seen some good attendance to those meetings as well, including from members here, which we're very excited about. On the slide is a list of policies that we've discussed so far and have gone through that process. I don't want to regurgitate everything on this slide. There's a lot there, including the feedback for some of these rounds that we've heard. I know that y'all received an email from me this morning outlining this, as well as the notes from our subcommittee meetings. Chair Azar, I know that you reached out to me and actually noted that you wanted to talk more about the policy against bias-based policing, standards of conduct, and use of force. We want to hear from all of you, and including you, Chair Azar, of course, on questions you might have about these policies as they've been finalized for right now, and any feedback you may have about the process. So with that, I will, unless Cheyenne.
Yes, I was going to just add for clarification, that list of could you go back? Thank you. That list of bullets that you see at the top of the slide, and I'm happy to read if into the record if necessary. Those are policies that have gone through the public process and we consider, I'm using air quotes, final at this point. Again, we're here to answer questions and happy to discuss those further, but wanted to let you know that. The flip side, and if for inquiring minds who are wondering how many more do we have, like a lot. There are a lot of policies and all of them are going to go through this process. We're still doing an inventory and deciding if we want to combine topics into one policy or separating them into multiple, but at minimum, we're going to have 80 policies. It is very likely to be more than 100. So we will keep working this. But obviously some of the ones that are listed on the screen are ones that we acknowledge are ones that are of utmost importance to the community. And are also, these ones are, with the exception of mission, vision, values, are all required by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement for each agency to have.
And I'll just add to about the process. Thanks, Cheyenne. As far as the way it's going, as far as the feedback, it's been very, very helpful for us. And we really encourage the feedback from the policing standpoint. I think I said this to Chair Vest a while back. We need people like you to tell us what we may not be thinking about, because obviously we're here for the entire community and serve the transportation system, but we definitely need the feedback. It's been going very, very well, and we encourage everyone to please continue to be involved in our, as we move forward.
Appreciate that. We'll open up to questions. Ms. Summers, go right ahead.
Yeah, and I'm gonna apologize because you may have said this and there was a lot of content, which is great. So I know that certain policies, you mentioned over 100 policies, at least 80 to 100 something policies. And I also know that obviously certain policies, as we've covered before here, are required for TCOL certification. How are all 100 required for TCOL or only a portion of those?
Only a portion. So TCOL, prior to this month, had a certain number required, and I believe the total was either 8 or 9. And those are the ones that you see on the screen. That's all they require. There are additional policies that are best practice, of course, that they just simply aren't required by state law. Sorry, I was like, who's it coming from? They aren't required from state law, but they are standard practice, and those will be continuing to come out from us. I'm trying to think of one. Training policies. What are the ones that are in internal review? One that we had is
Dress, uniform appearance and stuff like that.
Overtime, how we handle overtime and part-time officers and secondary employment, litany of kind of your standard things that you would think of. They're just simply not required by TCOL.
That's great. So with the ones that we saw on that slide, we have all the policies that TCOL requires. And then you mentioned the mission, vision, values. Those are done as well, or yeah, I believe we saw those before here, did we?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And yes, mission, vision, values, and code of conduct, which is standard for every agency. That one is documented as a policy, and it is complete. It's available online.
Great. So with that, are you ready, or when is the timing for the TCOL certification? What is that looking like?
Excellent question. Actually, we engaged our TCOL partnerships last Friday. And I'm trying to remember the exact date, but last Friday, the 26th, I think it was. But basically, we are at their, following within their guidelines now. We've submitted all our requirements, not only policies, but also the justification, things about our facility, how we'll operate, our dispatch, and things of that nature. So we had to submit that. It's in their hands right now for review, and they're gonna get back to us and tell us exactly, where we are and where we stand in that process. So we're basically standing by right now.
One of the things that I like to add when we're talking about TCOL is that it is one milestone and it's important, but it's not the only milestone. We have a lot of work to do to define training, to hire people, to get a budget approved, to do all of these things. And it's going to take months and months. So like Chief said, we have submitted to TCOL, and we're kind of waiting to hear back from them. When we do hear back from them, from a public perspective, from a customer perspective, nothing's going to change for some time, and we're going to stay communicative with the community about when things are changing, how they're changing, what they're seeing, and continue to do this engagement that we've committed to as we continue.
At one time, you were hoping to hire like in the fall. Is that still kind of the goal?
Yes, ma'am. The goal is to hire starting fiscal year 25, FY 25. But as she was mentioning, it's getting the TCOL process completed. It's just one of our goals. And what you'll see, and just from transparency, is myself and I have 2 staff members that will become sworn eventually first, because we're already here. But like she was saying, not a lot is going to change because it's only us 3 that's really here. And so our goal is to continue to do the administrative work, and we will be sharing as much information at the timely portions as we go through these processes. When we get closer to, and what you'll see more than anything, you'll see our website getting more information about what we're doing, when we'll start looking at hiring and stuff like that. We're sharing all this stuff with our PSAC committee, as well as our PSAC committee as well, in as far as what our branding is looking like and our logos, all that type of stuff. We got a lot of work to do before we can put any officers on the street.
Great, thank you. That answers all my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Summers. Other folks with questions or comments? Mr. Crossley, please go ahead.
To some extent, my question, I don't know the details, and so, but I'm curious about the process that in these input phases, I would hope there were people who meaningfully engaged and had strong concerns and complaints or suggestions. And is the number of additions and edits that you made greater than 0 based on those things? And there's a significant amount of, there was meaningful changes based on things that people brought up in this process.
Yeah, there was some meaningful changes, but a lot of it, to be honest with you, was just discussions about asking questions about why we do certain things. You know, for example, with, I'm trying to give you a good example right off the top of my head, but like standards of conduct, just explaining what our expectations are and how that aligns with our values and our mission. Use of force, talking about definitely, you know, barring chokeholds and stuff like that. That is definitely within our policy. Bias-based policing, understanding more important, like the reporting of bias-based policing. I mean, obviously we prohibit any type of bias-based policing, but there's some reporting structures that we have to do every year on an annual basis, and how we will view that. Those were more the kind of the input that we were getting, is asking questions about how and why those things happen. And I think it helped us understand that. And there were some tweaks in comments about changes and substantive changes.
I would like to note, as important as how the policy is written for community members who may not be as involved with policymaking, is the context in which that policy is being implemented. As Eric noted, Chief Robbins, I apologize.
Okay, it's okay. I'm okay with Eric.
I try to use titles during these public meetings. How we implement the policy and what we're doing on the context of that is also very important for how community members see the police force in action.
And again, Committee Member Crossley, I do want to note the comment log and what we did with each comment is available. To me, context with which we're operating, and the questions and the opportunity to just sit down and have a conversation around what does this mean? What were you intending with this? And that kind of thing is helpful to us because it helps us signal what's important. I also want to say, getting a lot of questions and being able to answer that confidently without a lot of changes is also, I hope, reflective of the intent that myself, Eric, our team has put into really being a proud member of this community and understanding some of the issues that have plagued our peers and this entire country as it relates to community interactions with police, and trying to be mindful of that. It is still a police department, but we are pushing at the direction of our leadership to be intentional and be thoughtful in how we're doing things. Some things are required by law. We have to do those things. It's pretty prescriptive. I kept going back and forth with Eric on bias-based policing. I think in state law, it actually says you have to have a policy on bias-based policing. And I'm like, biased against, or policy against bias-based policing, right? But, you know, little nuances like that of really trying to push and think through how closely do we align to state law? Where do we specifically really point back to state law? Where can we go above and beyond what's required of the law? Where can we take those perspectives of the community and be thoughtful with them? And I really do want to commend the chief. Eric has a long career in police, but he's not from Austin. And we all know, I'm an Austinite, we all know that this community is engaged and has a unique perspective. And Eric has dove in, especially over the last 6 to 7 months, of really hearing from people and being thoughtful in how we're creating these policies, and again, being intentional.
And I'll just add that she mentioned being in law enforcement over 30 years, it gives me a really appreciative approach to what we're doing. I think what the approach that Cap Metro is taking, based from the leadership, is basically let's make sure that we're not just looking at this from one side, and she's mentioned it, from a law enforcement perspective, there's things that we can all learn and we can all do better. And we understand that. And I think this approach that we're taking is important to see how we can, work with our community and not just quote, police our community, but see what else we can do to help our community out.
Thank you. Other folks with questions and comments? I'll go ahead, and I have a number of questions. And before that, I do want to say it's been exciting to see our public safety ambassadors as a frequent transit users. I'm seeing them already on all the stops and helping through, and it's been great seeing them at work. And I really have to commend them for their professionalism, friendliness, and I've seen them interacting with people and helping with people in more ways than just public safety. So that's really been exciting. It sort of is providing a whole new level of support for transit riders. So big thank you to all and to them as well.
Thank you so much for saying that, Chair. And I should have mentioned that a lot of our public safety ambassadors are also former operators. So they get it, they get it in a way that other people might not. And we're happy to see them happy and appreciated by customers. So thank you for that comment.
Big thank you to that. I guess my first, and thank you, Mr. Banks, for helping me. One question I had, and it's more of just a confusion. I saw, the sort of vehicle policy and also traffic stops is somewhere in the policies as well. I guess I was trying to understand when that might be initiated. Like, would it be that something happened on a Cap Metro facility and then they were pursued? Like, how will that sort of interact with the regular functions of the police department, Austin Police Department?
Excellent question. Our intent is not to be out doing traffic stops. That's the first most important thing. No traffic stops, no pursuits or anything like that. But by state requirements and state law, if we are a law enforcement entity and we have what we call markings on our vehicles, we have to have a policy that directs our officers on how to and what to do in these instances, meaning if we have to make a traffic stop or if we have to. And way we could qualify that is if, say, for example, the City of Austin Police Department or another police department is out on a traffic stop and they need assistance, then we need to have an understanding of how and to operate. But for the most part, our role is to be focused on the transportation system, our trains, our buses, our platforms, and those types of things. If there's an incident that's just say spills over and we may have to get engaged and get involved in someone in the vehicle, we will, but that's not the intent. It's basically to stay focused. And I can say the same thing. You see that for maybe even school district police departments as well.
I don't want to get, and I don't know that it's productive to get into what ifs because I think it could spiral quickly, but I will offer one scenario. If there was a violent incident on our vehicle, and the person involved potentially got off of the bus, stole a car and took off, that would be an example where our police are potentially going to pursue the vehicle to make sure that we are following a suspect, particularly if it's, a shooting or something like that, that is threatening public safety. We tried, this is one where we spent a lot of time talking through it. I don't have a background in police, and so it was a great experience for me to just ask kind of dumb questions and push the questions, right? And I think that the chief and the vehicle pursuit policy is one of the ones that's complete online. We were intentional in saying, we're not using certain tactics that are both threatening to the community as well as to the officer. And the chief time and time again said, vehicle pursuits are dangerous for everybody, including our officers, which we also want to protect. And we tried to instill that there, but there are limited instances. And again, it just depends on jurisdiction. And most importantly, we were required to have this policy because the state requires us to have the policy.
That makes sense, and I appreciate that, and I assumed that it was going to be something like that, but it's also important to hear that that's just a requirement. So that makes sense. I have a comment on the sort of use of force policy in the sort of training modules. We're looking at folks, if, you know, resources available, if folks, you know, how to engage with people with disabilities or pregnant persons. And I would, if possible, I would love to add to that for folks who might have language access issues, particularly if English is not their first language. I mean, I'll be honest, I have family who can engage in regular life in English, but I feel like if you put them in a stressed environment, I'll be honest, I don't know if they would be able to fully navigate life in English. So I think that's an important training to have as well, since we do have a community that is quite multilingual here in Austin.
Peter's got his pen out, and for the folks online, we're nodding in agreement with Chair Vez and taking that note.
Absolutely.
No, I really appreciate y'all sort of taking that. Again, I have more questions, but I'll open it up to see if folks have other thoughts or questions as well. I don't want to hog all the time. If not, I'll sort of jump into another theme. This was, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget the policy names fully. And I do want to acknowledge that I sent you all a note on what policies I might be focusing on very late. So I understand if you cannot fully dig into all the details or remember. I know I would not be able to remember off the top of my head either. But I think both sort of for the use of force or when we're looking at bias-based policing, for the review of it, and maybe there's a separate policy coming and I just don't know it and I don't see it. But in the review, will there be a place for some kind of community panel to be engaging in those conversations? I appreciate that. Or is that something that we truly expect those kind of conversations to happen internally? Like, how will an issue be managed? Because I think I see supervisors will be involved, but who beyond that will be involved and what might that look like?
Can I offer to clarify or just make sure we understand the question, and then I might ask the chief to respond as well. You're asking, especially in cases of use of force or allegations of bias in the police work, what is the response to those allegations? And will there be community involvement in that process, or what does that look like? Is that the question?
That is correct. And I was specifically, I guess, thinking where an investigation might be warranted or there might be some concern. Will there be some ability to have more folks involved in any investigation? And it may be that that's a future policy that's just not here yet.
It's a good point. And basically it kind of leads toward the oversight prospect. So I'll touch on that. But first and foremost, when there's an incident, particularly a use of force incident, it is automatically reviewed internally. It's kind of a standard procedure that a supervisor will go to that scene and look at that situation. And then, of course, document, look at the entire process. And then that will go up through the chain of command so that there's eyes on it and look at all of whether it's all of the information, the evidence, the video, documentation, and those kind of things. And if there's any dispute about the outcome, whether it's, there's a disagreement or something like that, then we have that ability to sit down to forward that all the way up through our CEO. And as far as the oversight and where that's gonna come out at, that's actually, we're discussing that now for a future policy, which will come into what we call our professional standards policy. And that particularly goes into if there's any allegations of whether it's misconduct or excessive force or something like that. And so those are more of a specific type of a process that goes into kind of a little bit of an oversight process. So we're still engaged in that, and we're trying to determine, one thing we don't want to do is kind of jump out there too fast and say this is exactly how it's going to be before we really know what the types of incidents and activities we'll be looking at. But yes, sir, we're still looking at that.
And I'll add, so this is, Chair Vez is referencing, for example, the policy against bias-based policing. It's one of our ones online, and it's very, very brief. It really only talks about what is bias-based or what is, I always trip up, what is the policy against bias-based policing? What is the role of each member of the department, including the supervisors, and then how do we report it to the state as we are required to? It also makes clear compliments and concerns and how people from the community can report those. It's not about the action that's taken yet, and that's what the chief was mentioning, that one of our future policies is going to dive into and procedures into what happens if there is a founded a complaint, if there's a founded or a use of force case, things like that. That is a critical element that we have to work out before we ever begin operations. And it's the intent that those processes are, appropriate and independent and scaled to the small size of the department that we're going to have, but upcoming.
Sorry to cut you off. These types of reports, whether it's use of force or complaints, or they will all be captured, and there will be, public reports for these types of things, whether we put them on online, or obviously we have to report them to the state on an annual basis. So these types of things will be captured, and they will be put out there for people to see, basically the number of activities and incidents we've had.
I really appreciate that. And I understand, I think I understand, right? Like it's sort of like, we're not even there yet in some ways in the conversation. So it's sort of to be seen, because I guess it comes down to, we have the policies, but there has to be a separate policy of what happens if somebody violates the policy, right? Knowing or unknowing, and how do we handle that? And it's a pretty complex conversation.
I think we are not doing the conversation justice by saying that police oversight is a complicated conversation, right? Especially in this community, as it should be, right? I wanted to add some just context of my learning with the chief and with Peter as well. Is one of the big areas that we get a lot of questions about is the operations and how is it all really going to work? What's going to happen when I call? Who's going to respond? Where are the officers going to be in the system? What's going to happen when I submit that a police report? How is it going to be investigated? What's the follow-up? All of those things, including what happens if I have an allegation, right, against the police department and how they operated. And those are the things that we really want to dive into over the next 6 months. Some of it depends also on how hiring and recruitment goes. If we all know that agencies across the country are struggling to hire. If we have a hard time hiring, it may change our operational position. We may have different, from my understanding, talking with the chief, if we are only able to hire 4 officers instead of 6, or instead of the full slate of 12 that we were projecting in that first year, how do we deploy them, and where are they, and what type of service are they responding to, and what specific calls they're responding to? It's all going to be dependent. And so oversight, again, is one of those things that's really critical before we begin operations, but it's also somewhat dependent on where are we at in terms of the size, scale, scope, and operation of the department. So it's complicated.
Excellent explanation.
I really appreciate that. And I guess, as we continue with our conversation, one thing that sort of comes to my mind is, for the city of Austin, we do have a community oversight committee that particularly for use of force incidents is able to review any, documentation that is available. And the same goes for, I guess, bias-based policing complaints that might come as well, because again, I think you're right about the sort of size of what might look like, but also I feel like it has engendered like essentially it creates a sense of appropriate community response where the community feels like we have people that we can trust be part of it adds to the transparency and the trust in the overall process to have that sort of almost third party engagement in the conversation as well. So I do want to bring that up because I think it's something that we've seen this community work well. Other questions and thoughts? Well, I do want to thank you all so much for being here and for being part of this conversation. I also just really want to appreciate the work that y'all have done in listening to our comments, both in shaping the process and the policies. So I just really want to thank you all for that work.
I think we all wanted to unmute to thank you all as well, and just really encourage you to keep pushing us and engage in the process. There's a lot more work to do. We know it's time consuming and y'all are otherwise committed on the many, many things that you serve on. But every ounce of your engagement is helpful. And if you know somebody who cares about these things, point them to engage with us because I really, like I said, I don't have a police background. If you had told me 3 years ago that I would be sitting at this table talking, hopefully as eloquently as I think I did about police, I would be shocked and not believe you. Oh man, eloquent out the window. But it's really important, again, as members of this community, that we do this right. And that's an expectation of our leadership and Dottie, et cetera. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you all very much. Chief, did you want to say, add?
I just want to say, she said it well, and she may be hired for a police officer at some point because she's doing so good. So we really do, but just to reiterate what she said, we really do appreciate this process and what y'all are doing. The more I come here, the more I participate, I learn the value of what y'all are doing for the city and the community, and it's a great thing. So it helps us. We need the feedback. We want it, and so please, we are open to it all the time. And she's cleaning up my mess.
No, appreciate that, and thank you so much, all of you.
Can I be a cuckoo bird
Yes.
and repeat? I don't know if that's actually, anyways. Very excited to continue collaborating with y'all and the rest of the community on this public safety work that we're doing. If you don't already, my phone is open if you need to reach out to me if you have a question. And y'all have my email, I believe, from the email I sent earlier this morning. So excited. Thank you.
No, thank you, Peter, Edna, and Melissa as well for your work on the community engagement side of this work as well. Okay, this takes us to our third discussion item for the day, which is discussion of an ex officio position and replacement of CAC member. Before I hand it over to Vice Chair Flato, who has been an amazing task of keeping us together in the governance working group and focusing on some of these issues, I just wanted to say, so again, Committee Member Conley has stepped off. His term regularly would have ended on December 31st, 2027. So there's a significant amount of time to go. So we would be looking to fill that seat. And with a reminder that eventually the decision for that is made by the Cap Metro Board, the Board of the Austin Transit Partnership, and the City of Austin Council. So they will be making those decisions. He did serve on a number of working groups. So those, it is up to him whether he wants to continue engaging on them, because reminder, working groups do not require service on the committee itself. So if we want to include more people, they can, but likely I think he will be stepping off those as well. And there is a process for sort of filling out vacancies, but I do want to give over to Vice Chair Flato to really walk us through some of the things, particularly maybe starting with the ex officio position conversation or wherever you think it makes sense.
Okay. So you want me to report on everything governance talked about now? Okay.
And how you would like us to proceed.
Yeah, on the ex officio, no, not on the ex officio, on the appointment or reappointment filling vacancies, the main thing we needed was a written letter of resignation to kind of start the process. So the next thing that happens, then the CAC chair will designate a working group to review the recent applications or the applications from the most recent process. And that group will select somebody to recommend for approval. And then I guess that does go to the ATP board and the city council, but they will, fortunately, we've just done that process fairly recently. So they will be pulling from that pool. I don't believe there's a process to get additional people in. I don't think so. I think it has to come from that pool.
What happens if somebody resigns in their last 6 months of their term, by which the list of candidates is 3.5 years old?
There's I'd have to look it up. We were looking more since this was more recent, but I do think that it is covered in the bylaws, how we do that. Do you remember, Courtney?
That's right. Right now, it's covered in the bylaws. We would use the current pool of applicants, no matter where we are in the process. I think if there comes a situation where we have to maybe address that issue, we'll have to deal with that when we get there.
And it's interesting, Ms. Brooks, that did pop into my mind as well. We're just not there yet. And may I not be the chair when that happens? I don't have to figure that out. But I think that's a good question. And hopefully once we get there, at least we will always have the capacity to send recommendations to those bodies. So we would be able to recommend to say, perhaps it's time and seems appropriate to open up the process as well. Even though that is not within the scope of what we can recommend, but we can make general recommendations regarding things like that.
I had two questions. So this is just to serve out the remainder of his term through 2027.
Correct.
So we drew straws and some of us are here through 2025. I don't know. Never mind. I just love being on this committee. I would take 2 more years, but I don't know. I thought, I think we'll have an easier time of it this time around. But I think as we progress into 2 years and 4 years, it may get more complex for us filling vacancies for sure. So we'll just deal with that as it comes.
Yeah, and we're assuming, I don't actually know how many people are in that applicant pool, but I assume it's a reasonable number to choose from.
I don't recall the exact number, but it was a significantly large applicant pool. So we'll make sure that we get all those numbers to you.
Over 60?
Something like that, over 60-ish.
In terms of so that's kind of how we'll proceed on that. And I don't know if the chair is going to appoint that working group now or quite how you're doing that, but.
Sure, since we're not posted for doing it, we'll put it on when it comes to the future agenda items, I'll go ahead and create that. If folks have an interest on being on that working group, please let me know. That would be great to know. And then we can work through that. You can let me know right now, or if you have an interest, you can later on send it to staff as well, and staff can let me know. We will create the working group next time to continue with that and go through that sort of process list as well.
I don't think it actually requires you to do it at a meeting, but I'd have to look at a different section.
No,
But
you
we'll
are actually right. It does not, working groups can be created by the chair at any time. Historically, just sort of for good process, we've made sure that we've done that through an agenda item. But if ever we need to do it urgently, I should be able to do it.
Great. So the other thing that governance talked about a couple things. One was filling the ex officio positions. We have 2 positions. And really, after discussing it a little bit, and thank you, Jeremy, we really, what we want to do is ask people now formally to start giving us ideas on who they think might be good in an ex officio position. And we were really kind of discussing a couple things, like kind of filling out any gaps of either knowledge or diversity or whatever we have currently, if we could kind of use these ex officio positions to fill those. I mean, in the past, people have kind of mentioned maybe it'd be nice to have somebody that was a lot younger than some of the people who are currently on the board, or, you know, those kind of things. So we'd like to just put a bug in your ear now to please, we'd like to fill these as soon as possible. We'd love to be able to bring them to the next meeting. So if people could start letting, you know, me or a boss or somebody know who they think might be a good ex officio, we'll kind of start getting that list together and, you know, try to move forward on those. Those, we just bring them up at a meeting and we get to vote on it. So it's a fairly simple process. It's not very technical.
Is the boundary there any resident of Austin or?
They do have to be a resident of, is it Austin or just the?
You have to be either within Austin or the CAP Metro service area.
I was gonna say, I thought it was the CAP Metro service area.
So it's both of those, and there's a little bit of overlap and a little bit of non-overlap in each of those.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't believe there's any, is there something else?
There's minor eligibility requirements like conflicts issues, things like that. But that's generally what we're looking for.
And keep in mind, they don't affect quorum. They don't actually vote on things. So you know, conflict of interest isn't quite the same with that position. So, so they could, you know, anyway, it's fairly broad. It's who we feel like would add to the conversation. The only other thing that I think we talked about at that meeting was just because our legal counsel had brought it up, we just need to remind people that we really do need to have, any of the committee members need to have their cameras on if they're remote during the meeting. It's fine to occasionally turn it off, but it's really, part of the TOMA, the Texas Open Meetings Act, requires that we need to have a quorum, and there's no way to know we have a quorum if we can't tell who's actually participating in the meeting. So in addition to, it's absolutely critical with roll call and votes, but it's actually important that cameras be on the whole meeting. But occasionally turning it off is not a big deal. It's just we need to know at any given time that we have a quorum. And I will have to admit, at the last meeting when I was running it, I really had no idea who was participating at a time. So I didn't really notice that that's an issue until I was running the meeting. And I think that's all we really talked about. But anyway, thank you all. Do you have any other questions?
Do folks have other questions? I'll make a comment as we proceed. So just to remind folks, really, again, two things. One, we'll put something on the agenda to have a conversation about appointing ex officio members at some point. Definitely, please share, if you have any recommendations, share those with staff, and staff can share them with the governance work group. Thank you again, Vice Chair Flatto, for really leading this conversation and helping us through that. And a reminder to folks, so in the past, our ex officio member was Dr. Alex Gardner from the University of Texas, and he was honestly a wealth of knowledge on the subject. But as we particularly moved away from some of our appointing committees as well, that became a space as well. We're fortunate that we have folks from the Urban Transportation Commission, but I know that had been an important thing. But we have the Customer Satisfaction Advisory Committee and other things from Cap Metro as well. So those remain places as well. If we feel like we need to liaise with other bodies better, they become an important space for us to think about as well. So I would say definitely missing gaps, although, gosh, now I get into the I'm too old to count as youth category, which I've been too old for that for a while. But within those conversations, sort of, I guess, if y'all can think through what are gaps we need to fill, what are really critical voices that we could need to be filling, or bodies that it would really benefit for them and us to liaise with us. Okay, if we don't have any other questions on that, this moves us to our other items for the day. So the first one is staff updates. So Ms. Chavez, do you want to get us started on that?
Sure, I have a few quick staff updates. The first one is that Katie Houston, who's our Director of Internal Audit, she'll be asking to come to this committee next month to talk about the FY25 audit plan. So to start thinking about things that you think she should put on her list for auditing of ATP. Second one, you have been asking about the governance assessments for the ATP technical advisory committees. We expect to have information available and for public discussion in July. Our scoping report, so we did the scoping process with community. All of my days run together, but not too long ago. The scoping report, which is really a conclusion of who we talked to and what was said, will be available later this month. So we'll want to share it with you all probably at the June meeting. And then finally, I see I'm about to call you Commissioner also. Committee member Brooks was commenting on Project Connect updates last month to give you an idea of a timeline. So right now, at the end of the scoping period for light rail, we're conducting all of the environmental analyses right now internally in-house. We'll be in a position to really talk more about where we are with those results in the fall. Pretty early in the fall, we think, but we're working on the timeline right now. So we won't have a whole lot to share out until we get to that point in the fall timeframe.
Okay, there were still some design decisions being discussed. Number of which stations where and so on. Is that in the fall?
That is in the,
Can you repeat your question into the microphone?
There are still a number of design issues being discussed, like the number of stations and where they're located and so on. Is that also expected outcome in the fall?
That's correct. And so what you will see in the fall when the draft environmental impact statement comes out is actually our conclusions based on community input and the analysis that'll open up an additional period of public input to then review that. And that is all of my ATP updates.
Thank you, Ms. Chavez. Ms. Dorado, do you want to give us an update from the Anti-Displacement Division?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I have just a brief update on the community initiated solutions and how things are going. In general, and this is, I'll say, information you can find on the Project Connect spending dashboard. But I just want to give a quick highlight. So the dashboard currently shows that we have 826 households that have been served through the anti-displacement funds, and this is through direct services. 50% of those who have been served are currently in active displacement risk areas. And a little over 73,000 people have been reached through the different programs via classes, flyers, or other methods, other kind of bigger classes and events. I want to give two highlights. Yesterday, we had a convening in our department with all the organizations that were awarded the anti-displacement funds. This is the first kind of convening that we host. It is not open to the public, but it is an opportunity for the organizations to really just kind of learn from each other, share any lessons learned, challenges, and also have an opportunity to potentially partner with each other and just leverage efforts. So it was a great opportunity, and we look forward to doing more of these in the future. And then I also wanted to highlight that El Buen Samaritano, they have been able to disperse the $1 million that they had through these funds through direct rental assistance. And they were able to support 196 households. So with that, their contract is coming to an end because they have been able to use all the money. So again, I'll be happy to provide in every month kind of a highlight of different organizations. But this information you can also find through the dashboard. And we'll be happy to come and provide more details into like another meeting as kind of contracts start to come to a close and we have more data about impact and people who's being served. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Mr. Rado. Mr. Barthelmiller, did you want to provide us an update from the Project Connect office?
Yes, the Project Connect office in the city's planning department has been going through the code amendment, the spring code amendment process for the last couple of months, the transit supportive code amendments. This week, we've held two additional open houses, Monday evening at Anderson High School in Northwest Austin, and last night at the Carver Museum in East Austin. We had about 25 community members attend Monday nights, and I believe the number was about 85 last night at the Carver Museum. Each code amendment has gone through the Planning Commission so far, and one work session for City Council. There will be a further work session Tuesday, the 14th, with City Council again before Council takes action next Thursday on May 16th on the code amendments. The Project Connect office has also been supporting ATP's federal process for the capital investment grants funding application and draft environmental impact statement, which will be submitted later this year, each of them, coordinating across city departments to identify data sources and review engineering and design plans and provide feedback where appropriate on city policy, programs, and regulations throughout this process for both federal processes. And then later this month, the city's housing department will meet, or actually ATP will present to the city's housing department, giving an update on where Austin Light Rail is in the process. And then there will be a further meeting with the displacement prevention team and real estate team in housing with Peter Mullen's design team and ATP's real estate team, just to go into further detail.
Thank you so much. Do we have an update from Cap Metro? Mr. Breton, did you want to provide us an update?
Hello, Peter Breton. It's always good to see my counterpart. We have the beard and the hair. He's just got the glasses. Hi, Peter. It's nice to see you. I have two small updates. Number one, transit plan. We are in the very beginning stages of planning out the public engagement for our transit plan 2035. One sentence, if you're not aware of what the transit plan is, we are creating a 5-year and a 10-year plan as we look holistically at our service and the needs of the community. Oh, man, that echo is bad. Looking at the needs of the community in terms of their public transportation needs. Penelope and Edna from the community engagement team are working to map out engagement in terms of our advisory committees, both with Cap Metro and the CAC as well. They'll be reaching out to Courtney, Giannis, Cherazar, and the rest of the CAC to map that out with y'all moving forward. The second update I have is that we are launching another round of engagement for our Metro Bike Strategic Expansion Plan. I need to get closer to the microphone. Okay. We are launching a new round of engagement for our Metro Bike Strategic Expansion Plan. May 18th at noon, we are kicking off at Plaza Saltillo a community group ride in partnership with Ride Bikes Austin. We will be taking a tour north, going through Mueller, having a mid-stop, coming back down, and then ending again at Plaza Saltillo. At about 1:30 at that point, we will have a strategic expansion plan open house where we're engaging the community. We would love to see you there. You can reach out to me at my email to ask for more information about that. We are expecting as well Bike Texas and Yellow Bike Project to be there, so we're excited to be there with them.
Thank you so much. That takes us to if folks have any working group updates that they would like to provide. And thank you, we've got the governance working group has already covered most of its work, but I don't know if other folks had anything else they would like to add. Reminder again that if you are looking to engage in some of those conversations, our working group and the members of those are on the Project Connect website. So you can look at which of your peers are on there, but also for community members who might like to see if they want to reach out about anything specific. This takes us to future agenda items and future meetings. I'll go ahead and ask that we place the item to essentially both fill the ex officio seats and then also make a recommendation regarding the vacancy on our committee and forward those recommendations as well. At least it would be a good idea, I think, to put both of them on the agenda. And if we're not able to make a decision by that time, we can certainly take more time, but it makes more sense to put them on than not. Ms. Chavez.
I just wanted to be clear, are you going? Are you setting the working group first or?
We'll be creating the working group first. So that will be the item on that. And then for ex officios, for now, we'll just go ahead and make that recommendation. Just put it on there, at least if we're able to make those pieces. Are there any other future agenda items that folks would like us to place on the agenda? I will say we have a number of outstanding items, so we're beginning to sort of work through them, particularly in the coming months. I think we're going to be turning our attention to a number of specifically light rail related items as well. So keep an eye out on that. And two things I just want to highlight is one from Ms. Rado as she was providing the update. If there are things or particular elements people want more detail on, please let us know and we can put that on the future agenda items. But for now, it made sense for us to maybe cover all of these as we move forward in the staff updates. But again, happy to bring that back to the full committee in more detail if that is the will of the body. Go ahead, Mr. Crossley.
Can I suggest an idea that maybe is a bit in the future, but the council will consider sort of ETOD 1, but there's a plan for the more in-depth ETOD 2 zoning proposals. And so when would it be appropriate for us to spend time talking about that? So
I think that's a great idea, and we do have a working group on that, so I think we can hopefully let our staff know. So Project Connect office, if you can convey this to our planning staff, City of Austin's planning staff, that the working group would like to start engaging in that process, that would be great. I know that's something they'll be working on in the fall.
Yeah, I think I'm on that working group. So I think if we have some lead time, we need time to get ready for next year. So now is probably a good time to start, not too early to start, honestly, if our staff are ready to convene us or work with us.
Mr. Bartholomew.
I'll bring that to the ETOD team. I will say that it won't be until midsummer at the earliest. They're getting through this month and then taking a well-deserved break. But yeah, I will let them know.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, with no objection, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the Project Connect Community Advisory Committee at 6:58 PM. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.